Gentleman yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentlewoman from New Jersey, Ms. McIver, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today on behalf of our nation's workers to give voice to their fear, their concern, their anger. While the American people are focusing on putting food on their tables, the Labor Department has quietly dismantled decades of hard-fought protections for our communities. These rollbacks are not just isolated attempts. They are part of a broader calculated effort to weaken the rights, safety, and dignity of Americans' workers in the hopes that no one would notice. But guess what? We have noticed. We will not let them get away with it. My colleagues and I have demanded the Labor Secretary in these attacks on working people and their families be addressed. If the Secretary will not act, we will take matters into our own hands. And that is why we are here tonight, to bring these actions to light and to show the American people exactly what's at stake. Tonight, you will hear from my colleagues about the impact of each of these rollbacks, about the way that our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers will be hurt by something the administration is trying to do in the shadows. You will hear about the specific rules that this administration has rolled back, rules that put home care aides, farm hands, construction workers, workers with disabilities, minors, and so many more at risk. As you hear about these rules, ones that don't always get a lot of attention, but that matter so much to the people they protect, you will come to the same conclusion that we have. If you work in America today, you are less safe than you were a year ago. You are more likely to be underpaid, exploited, and ignored. You are more likely to be hurt on the job, underrepresented, and left to fend for yourself. That is unacceptable. I'm proud to have led my colleagues in urging the Secretary of Labor to immediately reverse course on these actions. As I yield to my colleagues standing with me tonight, I urge my colleagues across the aisle to consider, how many more of these rules do we let the Trump administration get away with before saying enough is enough? I hope this convinces them to follow suit. With that, I would like to yield to the distinguished gentleman from Virginia, the ranking member of the Committee on Education and Workforce, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, and I thank the gentlelady for yielding and thank her for organizing this special order so we can discuss the actions of the Department of Labor. Right now, the Trump administration and congressional Republicans are starting to implement an aggressive deregulatory agenda that harms workers. Trump's deregulatory agenda weakens workers' civil rights, undermines worker protections and hard-earned wages, and downgrades the U.S. economy. Right now, the Trump administration is in the process of rolling back labor regulations that do a lot of things like promote non-discrimination and strengthen the regulations would have, the ones they're trying to undermine. The regulation as it is promotes non-discrimination and strengthens registered apprenticeship standards. They're rolling that back. They're rolling back the regulation that prevents the privatization of state civil services. They're rolling back the regulation that strengthens fair wage protections for home health care, for home care workers, that would enable them to keep minimum wage and other protections. They're rolling that back. They're requiring federal contractors to pay workers at least $15 an hour. They're rolling that back. Regulations to create clear and specific requirements for occasions when employers must require the use of respirators that prevent the exposure to toxic chemicals that can cause cancer and other diseases. They're rolling that back. Regulation to bolster labor protections for farm workers on guest worker visas. They're rolling those protections back. Implement federal law requiring affirmative action for employees and applicants with disabilities, ensuring that they're hired, retained, and promoted by federal contractors. They're rolling that back. enforce anti-discrimination and affirmative action requirements, and ensure that federal contractors offer equal employment opportunities to workers. They're rolling that back. And there are more rollbacks waiting in the wings. For in fact, the Labor Department just sent a draft rule sitting on the White House Regulatory Office right now that would likely weaken the rules that prohibit children from working in particularly dangerous jobs. All workers deserve to be paid fairly, earn good benefits, and come home safely at the end of the day. If we truly want to prioritize workers, we must strengthen the laws, including regulations that protect workers' health and safety on the job and empower workers' ability to form unions and bargain for their rights. The Trump administration instead is rolling back regulations that protect workers, and we should be doing better. And so I thank the gentlelady for organizing this special order and giving us the opportunity to discuss what is going on at the Department of Labor. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you so much to the ranking member, the fine gentleman of Virginia, for your remarks and for coming here this evening to talk with us. Thank you so much. Mr. Speaker, home health aides are some of the most essential workers in our economy, taking care of our parents and grandparents as they age, and ensuring that sick and disabled people can live with dignity. It is downright despicable that this administration has proposed to reverse the rule requiring that these vital workers be paid the federal minimum wage. This reckless rollback threatens the dignity, wages, and basic rights of nearly 4 million of our lowest paid and most essential workers, the majority of whom are women and women of color. These care workers are certified nursing assistants, home health aides, personal care attendants, and direct support professionals. They provide skilled, often medically necessary care from administering medication to helping with daily activities like bathing, dressing, and eating. Their work is both physically and emotionally demanding. It is essential to the health, safety, and independence of nearly 10 million older adults and people with disabilities who rely on these services to remain in their homes and communities. For some, it's the care they receive from these aides that actually helps them enter or remain in the workforce. It's difficult to capture the profound impact they have on not only families, but our economy. While they wait for that proposal to go through, the administration has already announced that they will no longer enforce the care worker rule, effectively stripping these workers of basic wage protections without notice, without public comment, and without regard for the devastating impact this will have on families, caregivers, and our long-term care system. Mr. Speaker, I just can't wrap my head around some of these changes. Home care workers are too valuable. They are already underpaid and underprotected. 2 in 5 already living at or near the poverty line. Nearly half relying on public assistance to make it. Now Trump wants to give the green light to pay these folks less than $7.25. Yes, I said it, $7.25 an hour. It's just wrong. It's completely unsustainable. We are already in the midst of a staffing crisis in the care economy. I know my colleagues are afraid of the Bureau of Labor Statistics these days, but BLS says that demand for home care workers will grow by more than 20% in the next decade as our population ages. How are we going to recruit and retain the workforce we need to take care of our seniors if we don't pay them? Surely they can't make it if we don't pay them, or they can't stay employed if we don't pay them. Mr. Speaker, this is not just a labor issue. It is a civil rights issue. It's a women's right issue. It's a disability issue. I know this administration is already sick of hearing from me, but that's too bad. In August, I wrote to the Secretary of Labor urging her to stop these rollbacks. Today, I want to again call on the Department of Labor to withdraw this dangerous, disgusting proposed rule immediately, to reinstate full enforcement of the 2013 rule, and to focus its efforts where they belong, on improving wages, training, and conditions for our home care workers. With that, Mr. Speaker, I now yield to the fine gentleman from California, Mr. Desanye, to discuss conditions for some of our most vulnerable workers, those with disabilities.
First, I want to thank the gentlewoman from New Jersey for having this session, bringing us together to highlight how the Trump administration is undermining hard-won protections for workers. And I really appreciate the comments and sort of the introduction to my comments, a community that I have been close to and worked for diligently for a long time. That used to be a bipartisan issue. That opportunity to discuss a group of workers who are often overlooked, but are also being very much hurt by the deregulatory agenda of this administration, workers with disabilities. In December, the previous administration under President Biden's leadership and the Department of Labor released a proposed rule that would phase out, as quickly as possible, sub-minimum wage certificates, which allow employers to legally pay workers with disabilities below the federal minimum wage. This was long, long overdue. About 38,500 disabled workers earned a sub-minimum wage in 2024 because of these certificates. Those 38,000 people deserve better, much, much better. In taking action, the Biden Department of Labor spoke for those workers and pushed for them to have a livable, honorable wage. The department noted that opportunities, legal protections, and support for disabled workers have increased since 1989, when the regulation was last updated. However, in July, the Trump Department of Labor decided to undo that long, long overdue progress that was enacted by the Biden administration and House and Senate Democrats, and instead continued to issuing sub-minimum wage certificates. Reminder to people around the country and Californians, the federal minimum wage is $7.50. They were being paid below that. In doing so, this administration is turning back the clock on disability rights. Multiple states, including the state I live in and represent, California, have already prohibited sub-minimum wages for workers with disabilities. Good for them. These sub-minimum wage laws federally have been used to justify paying people just a few cents per hour for work. The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and the National Council on Disabilities have called for an end to the practice by paying disabled workers less and paying them what they deserve, at least a minimum adjustment. While disabled individuals continue to face challenges in achieving equal opportunity and treatment, we have made great strides in our understanding of disability and workplace accommodations. Paying these American workers less can no longer be justified by any standard, yet this administration insists on doing it. Rather than allow employers to continue underpaying disabled workers, this administration must and should reverse course and respect the dignity and contributions of these workers. Again, I want to thank Representative McIver for coming here and bringing this to the attention of the American public. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen of California, for your remarks and for joining me this evening. At this very moment, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Labor is working to rescind the Farm Worker Protection Rule, a Biden-era standard that gave farm workers, many of them seasonal workers here under the H-2A visa program, the basic right to speak up about unsafe working conditions without fear of being fired or deported. Let's be clear, this rule that the administration is attacking wasn't about politics. It wasn't about gangs or drugs or any of the disgusting tropes the other side will paint against hardworking immigrants. It was about seatbelts in vans, safety on the job, and the simple human dignity of not being punished for demanding better conditions. And what has this administration done? They've proposed to strip those protections, both for transportation safety and for organizing on farms. And while they wait for that change to take effect, they've announced they will not enforce the 2024 Farm Worker Rule at all. So what does that mean in practice? It means workers, including the 300,000 seasonal workers that come to our country to do vital work supporting our nation's agriculture industry, are once again forced to choose between their safety and their survival. It means transportation will remain the leading cause of death for farm workers. And it means that the worst of the worst employers get a free pass. It doesn't stop there. The Trump's Department of Labor also wants to stop coordination between the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division, OSHA, and the Employment and Training Administration on enforcement of farm worker protections. These agencies are supposed to work together to stop abuse. Corrupt recruiters have infiltrated the H-2A program, charging workers illegal fees and taking advantage of the most desperate migrant workers, and actually facilitating human trafficking. And the administration's answer? Make it harder to investigate them. Make it harder to kick these abusive recruiters out of the H-2A system. To against their own promises, let the trafficking continue. Let's be clear again, the H-2A program is one of the largest sources of labor trafficking in the United States. The safety regulations the Labor Department is going after were designed to keep workers safe. But Trump's regulatory changes send a clear message to employers. Retaliate against your workers, is what the administration is saying. Trump says, silence them all you want. No one's coming to stop you. This doesn't just hurt migrant farm workers. It drags down the working conditions and wages of all agricultural workers in America. Every time protections are stripped away from one group, it undercuts the baseline for everyone else. This is all by design. And while this administration is gutting legal protections, they're slashing transparency too. The National Agricultural Statistics Service just announced it will eliminate the Farm Labor Survey, the very tool we use to understand what farm workers are paid and how they're treated. This survey informs wages for H-2A jobs. Eliminating it makes exploitation easier and accountability harder. Mr. Speaker, the cruelty here is not accidental, it's deliberate. It's rooted in a despicable framework that sees farm workers, particularly those from other countries and those that are black and brown, as disposable. These workers feed America. They feed you every night. They do the work most people can't and won't. And instead of protecting them, this administration wants to strip away their voice and hand power to the very people who exploit them. With that, Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield to the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Mrs. Omar, to discuss the tools available to OSHA to keep Americans safe at work.
Thank you so much. Mr. Speaker, as the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Workforce Protection, I rise today to speak about the sweeping set of proposals from Trump's Department of Labor that threatens worker safety, fair pay, and basic protections for millions of Americans. The department is moving to rewrite or repeal more than 60 workplace regulations. Let me say that again, 60 workplace regulations. It will affect conditions in farms, in factories, in construction sites, and in mines. These changes are being framed as modernization, but in reality, they put workers at greater risk and undermine decades of hard-won labor protections. Among the most far-reaching proposals is the narrowing of OSHA's General Duty Clause, one of the most important tools protecting workers when no specific safety standard exists. For more than 50 years, the General Duty Clause has allowed OSHA to step in when employers expose workers to recognize hazards that are serious, preventable, and likely to cause harm. Under the Trump administration's labor proposal, OSHA will no longer be able to cite employers for hazard conditions intrinsic to a job that could leave construction workers, factory workers, farm workers, and others in high-risk professionals with fewer protections and less accountability when something goes wrong. But the administration's rollbacks go well beyond the general duty clause. Millions of home healthcare workers could be paid below minimum wage and denied overtime protection, leaving them vulnerable to long hours and financial insecurity. Migrant farm workers could lose critical safeguards, including seatbelt requirements on employer-provided transportation and protections against retaliation for reporting unsafe conditions. Construction workers could see basic requirements for adequate lighting eliminated, and miners could lose critical oversight on ventilation, roof safety, and training. Even respiratory and chemical safety standards in hazardous workplaces are being rolled back. These changes represent a fundamental shift in priorities of putting corporate convenience over worker safety. Eliminating all of these rules is a clear signal from the Trump administration that they view workers' lives as expendable. When protection for the most vulnerable workers are stripped away, the consequences will be severe and immediate. American workers are not disposable. They deserve workplaces that are safe, fair, and accountable. They deserve the dignity of protection that ensures they can return home from work alive and uninjured. Congress must reject efforts that roll back the clock on worker safety and labor rights. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Representative LaMonica McIver for hosting tonight and for her leadership on this issue. I yield back.
Thank you so much to the gentlewoman from Minnesota for joining tonight and for your remarks. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to Trump's attacks on diversity of our workforce, the Department of Labor is his biggest cheerleader and superfan. Matter of fact, they're president of the fan club. After Trump rescinded the Equal Employment Opportunity Executive Order, the Department of Labor proposed to remove the requirement that those who do business with the federal government cannot discriminate in hiring. On top of that, Trump is demanding that companies send proof that they're eliminating their anti-discrimination programs and show proof that they've abandoned affirmative action plans. Federal contractors may sound to some people like a narrow, far-off group. Who even are they? But in reality, federal contractors are a massive segment of our economy, and chances are you or someone you know relies on federal contracts through work. And under Trump, their employers would no longer be able to even collect data on the racial, ethnic, and gender makeup of their workforce. Let me repeat that. The federal government is proposing that contractors no longer even track discrimination. If you stop collecting the evidence, you can pretend the crime no longer exists. The result? An older, whiter, more male-dominated workforce that doesn't fully reflect the diversity of backgrounds that makes our nation great. Let's call it what it is: a calculated, careless, cowardly rollback of hard-won protections carried out under false pretense and driven by an agenda that wants to take us back to 1964. And if that weren't enough, just weeks after the Trump administration announced its plans to eliminate the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, the agency charged with enforcing anti-discrimination in federal contracting, the Department of Labor has now launched a full-scale attack on workers with disabilities. Shameful. Trump's DOL is dismantling the requirement that federal contractors take steps to employ qualified individuals with disabilities. At a time when disabled Americans face historic employment gaps, this administration wants to turn back the clock and undo the progress we've made over decades of disability work. And as my colleagues have mentioned, they even want to bring back the cruel, outdated policy of allowing employers to pay disabled workers less than minimum wage. Often pennies on the dollar. How disgusting. for someone who is doing the same work as everyone else each and every day. My colleagues across the aisle want you to be afraid of federal DEIA programs, maybe even to think they're stopping you from getting a job. In reality, these are things like paid internships, so you don't have to come from a well-off family to work a federal job. Basic disability accommodations in the office, making sure the office coffee pot is in reach of someone in a wheelchair. Are these destroying our workforce like the president says? These moves are not about fairness. They are about power, about stripping protections from the most marginalized so the powerful can operate without accountability. We need to be open and honest about the truth. These actions will increase discrimination in the workforce. They will make us less productive, not more productive, and they will focus and they will turn the focus of federal hiring away from merit. Some of these rollbacks, Mr. Speaker, are awful, terribly awful. But some of them seem like they're just torn from the law textbook, from a law textbook. I mean, seriously, the administration wants to get rid of the minimum lighting standards for construction sites. Let me say that again for the public that may be watching. This Trump administration wants to get rid of the minimum requirement for lighting standards for construction sites. For those of you watching at home, I know that sometimes what we do here is a bit hard to follow, and maybe you don't want to sift through the jargon that gets thrown around. But let me just read to you the standard that this administration wants to get rid of. Here's what Trump wants to take out of the code of federal regulation. It reads as follows: construction areas, aisles, stairs, ramps, runways, corridors, offices, shops, and storage areas where work is in progress shall be lighted with either natural or artificial illumination. Getting rid of the requirement for good lighting on construction sites so you can't see the nail you're hitting. Who okayed this? Seriously. Let's just think about this for a second. If you're working on a construction site under the Trump administration, your boss does not have to make sure any electrical equipment rooms, first aid stations, and the rest of the job site actually have enough light to allow you to see what you're actually doing. We hear all day about the regulations supposedly weighing down our economy, all about the red tape. And without a doubt, I sit on the Small Business Committee. I'm happy to talk about red tape, but these are basic safety standards. But what do I know, right? I'm here to represent the people of New Jersey's 10th Congressional District. I don't work on a construction site every day. Like me, you may want to know what the experts think. In 1962, Congress created the Advisory Committee on Construction Safety and Health to answer just that question. Well, guess what, folks? The Trump administration fired all of the members of the committee. And OSHA just issued a final rule removing the requirement that it consult with the committee before modifying or repealing construction safety regulations. So, Trump's OSHA doesn't have to consult the experts because it said so, just because they said so. It's truly unbelievable. Let's make something clear, Mr. Speaker. The administration's actions at the Department of Labor aren't just tinkering, and they're not just some complicated bureaucratic procedure. They are life and death decisions that right now the Department of Labor is rolling back protections that generations of miners fought and died for. Earlier this year, the Department of Labor plans to shutter dozens of the Mine Safety and Health Administration field offices across the country. These are the frontline offices that work to keep mines safe and helping review plans, inspect sites, and make sure someone is there to look out for workers when lives are on the line. Eventually, when that plan came to light, the administration changed course and announced that it would not close the 34 offices it wanted to. But now, Mr. Speaker, they're trying to shutter the offices another way by gutting the rules that give the Mine Safety and Health Administration the power to act, even if the offices stay open. Let me walk you through just how dangerous these rollbacks are. One repeal removes the requirement to inspect drilling areas for hazards before operations begin and gets rid of the need to repair dangerous drilling equipment. Another rollback narrows the training protocols that the Mine Safety and Health Administration district managers can require before approving mining operations. In fact, Trump wants to limit what can be required in a roof control and ventilation plan, which would help protect miners from roof collapses and toxic dust in the air. He wants to deregulate roofing and necessary ventilation. Mine operators are no longer required to give workers hard copies of hazard communications or HAZCOM. Historically, employers are required to inform their employees in a mine of what chemicals or hazards they may face to help prevent injury and illness. Trump and his cronies are even going after the tools used to measure lighting and visibility underground, as I've mentioned about the construction sites as well. As we speak, Trump is working to give more control to mine operators about their safety and health plans, even when we know the injuries and death will follow. We know what keeps miners safe, but this administration doesn't think we should let the Mine Safety and Health Administration require it. Maybe the most unbelievable decision in the delay of the toxic silica rule, a rule 40 years in the making. The science is crystal clear. Silica exposure causes lung cancer, chronic respiratory disease, black lung, and even death. Something older than me. The Mine Safety and Health Administration itself had estimated this rule would prevent more than 1,000 deaths and 3,700 cases of silica-related illness. But the Trump administration says it's on hold. What are we talking about here? Weakening or removing respiratory requirements, fit testing, medical evaluations, and training for exposure to some of the most dangerous substances like asbestos, lead, vinyl chloride, and more. But look, colleagues and Americans watching at home, the administration says it's too prescriptive to ensure workers don't inhale poisons that actually kill them. It's too much of a burden to make sure a respirator actually fits. It's too much red tape to make sure a worker's lungs can survive the shift. What do you say? Let's be clear. Miners and workers didn't ask for these rollbacks. The only people calling for these changes are the lobbyists and executives who've never set foot inside of a mine, who've we never watched a coworker die in the collapse, who've we never buried a friend with black lung. Safety cannot be optional. Miners cannot be expendable. Congress cannot stand idly by while the Labor Department turns on the people it was created to protect. With that, Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield to the gentlewoman of New Mexico, Ms. Stansbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm here tonight to stand union strong with our workers across America in solidarity with my sister from New Jersey, Representative McIver. We stand union strong, labor strong, America strong, and worker strong. And Mr. Speaker, I think it's notable as we stand on this floor tonight, I want to be honest, there's not a single Republican here to stand with our workers. Because let's be honest, When my colleagues across the aisle say that they stand for American manufacturing and American jobs, they don't mean that they stand with American workers. They're there to stand with the corporations and the people who line their pockets off of the sweat of the hardworking men and women who actually do the work in this country. And unfortunately, as I look around this floor this evening, I don't see a single one of them standing in solidarity. Under this administration, we have seen an unprecedented attack on our unions and worker protections. Protections that keep our workers safe from injury, illness, and death on the job, all to shield employers from accountability and to increase their profits. Instead of standing with workers, they've weakened rules on overtime, rolled back safety standards, and gutted protections for wage theft. And if you want any indication of where the current president stands on the Department of Labor and American workers, all you have to do is walk down the street and you will see a 3-story picture, not of the American worker on the front of the Department of Labor, but of Donald Trump's face, who spent American taxpayer hard-earned dollars to put his face on the Department of Labor, which is the United States agency that is supposed to demand protections for our workers. Now, for me, this isn't just political. It's personal, because I grew up in a labor family. My mother was a factory seamstress, and in fact, she sewed 79,000 pockets on jeans and tried to organize a garment workers union at her factory and was fired for trying to demand fair wages for factory seamstresses like herself and thousands of women and people across the country who work every day for this country, for daring to demand better conditions and higher pay. But it is her grit and her determination and her belief in the dignity of workers that I carry with me into this chamber every day, because even upon her firing for trying to organize as a factory worker, my mother became one of the first women operating engineers to work on heavy equipment in the state of New Mexico. And that is the spirit that I see all across our state. Just last week, we stood in solidarity with striking workers and our Teamsters local at the Creamland Dairy, fighting for fair wages and safe conditions. That solidarity has resulted in a fair wage and a new labor contract for those workers. At the University of New Mexico, we've stood with graduate students who are holding work-ins as they demand a fair contract. We've stood with SEIU and our residents in our medical school who are demanding fair pay. We're standing with our teachers who are demanding fair pay. And we stood with the Wells Fargo's workers in Albuquerque who made history in becoming the first unionized branch ever in the history of this country. And it was that solidarity when we stood with 80,000 flight attendants stuck in endless negotiations that helped to get fair wages and a new contract for our flight attendants. That is what it means to stand for workers. Not just speeches, pictures on buildings, but in action, in standing with our unions and standing for fair pay. Because, Mr. Speaker, the theme here is simple. Workers just want a fair shot. They want dignity. But unfortunately, under this administration, the rug is being pulled out from under their feet. Shameful, it's dangerous, and it flies in the face of everything that this country was built on. Because let us not forget that unions built this country. It's unions that gave us the weekend. It's unions that gave us the 5-day work week. It's unions that gave us overtime pay. It's unions that gave us safe workplaces. It's unions that gave us fair wages. And every worker in America benefits from the courage of organized labor and every man and woman who has stood for their fellow workers. So I'll end with this. I know where I stand. I stand with my mother and the countless generations that come before us of workers across the United States and in my home state who stood with the American worker. We will always stand for unions. We will always stand for labor, and we will always stand for the American worker. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you so much to the gentlewoman of New Mexico for joining us and for your remarks. Mr. Speaker, tonight we have heard about the increased discrimination in the workplace, the repealing of protections for those with disabilities, and the dangerous construction sites our neighbors are forced to show up to. All of this is part of the dangerous campaign the Department of Labor has launched to dismantle decades of progress for working Americans. These rollbacks are a direct assault on workers' safety, wages, and dignity. From healthcare workers, many of them women and women of color, at risk of losing minimum wage and overtime protections, to construction workers who could now be forced to operate in unsafe conditions with no guarantee of adequate lighting or visibility standards, to farm workers who already endure grueling conditions are being stripped of hard-fought protections. None of this is okay. This is not normal. Allow me to say this plainly for the second time tonight. If you work in America today, you are less safe than you were a year ago. You are more likely to be underpaid, exploited, or ignored. This is unacceptable. I'm proud to have led 64 of my colleagues in urging the Secretary of Labor to reverse course. And I am proud of the work we have done here tonight to make sure that none of this goes unnoticed. This work is about the people we serve, and every single American. It's about the home care worker pulling double shifts, the construction worker trying to make it home to his kids. It's about the farm worker who feeds our families and us, but can't protect their own. We have heard about the rules that will put America's workers in danger. And if we do not do something about these rules, things will get worse for American workers. They are unsafe and underpaid, and it's time we do something about it. As that concludes my remarks for tonight, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include material on the subject of my special order hour into record.
Without objection.
With that, Mr. Speaker, I thank you and I yield back the balance of my time.